No, sorry, this isn't Daryl Davis, but he can do a good imitation of Daryl Davis. That's Griff Bordignon. Oh boy, it's one of those days, and of course, David Morisuti, our regular co-star here on the CFL Talk Show. Thank you for joining us, Griff. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Always happy to join you, fellas.
And of course, always grateful for David's contribution to the program.
How's it going?
It's okay. It's okay. I guess it's preseason, so this is the time of year that you watch a team at home in the exhibition season, and they give you a loaded lineup. The team on the road goes, let's see what guys can play well against a loaded lineup. Let's find out how well they can play. I don't know, David. That's my definition of these exhibition games. They're not really matches. They're more or less, resumes now gone from writing to inaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the preseason has taken a bit of a different. I think teams have taken a different approach the last couple of years. Like you used to see, now with just 2 preseason games, you're not going to see as many teams throw out players that likely don't have any chance. Like the Argos had their starting lineup start the game. Usually preseason, you don't see teams do that very often. But I think it's knowing that you gotta take advantage of the reps, right? Because how many times we've seen in the regular season where teams really struggle out the gate because they just don't have the reps during preseason, during training camp, and all that.
Yeah, that's the big thing too. Like we noticed that Saturday night in Hamilton, but it's going to be interesting to see what we see Friday night, because I know Dinwiddie's already confirmed that it's not going to be Arbuckle. It's mainly going to be Dukes and Horn, But then now there's a third quarterback in the mix, which is very interesting on Toronto's end. And also today's practice, we went from a practice to a walkthrough. So I'm wondering, is there something there that they're planning to do that we don't know about yet, or what's going on? But no, for the most part, it's just teams figuring it out. And I think this week more than anything though is really about those guys that like the final cuts. Like, hey, not so much the guys that are probably going to be on the outside looking in, but the ones that have the chance to make a name for themselves and like, hey, claim a roster spot come Saturday night.
Yeah, part of the reason I think also that the Argos could play their full lineup is they really don't play a home game. Not that Guelph isn't a home game, but it really isn't. It's not one that, a vast majority of fans will be at.
For Guelph standards, I feel like they're going to pack the place, but that's only like 5,000 or 6,000 people. But yeah, if this was at BMO Field, I don't think there's over 10K in the crowd.
The other thing is well, listen, why don't we drill down on the new quarterback, Griff? You've introduced him. Talk about him. Tell us what you know about him and share it with the viewers.
So, I'm going to go even further and find the press release from one Mr. Chris Bolanovich. The Toronto Argonauts Football Club announced today the signing of American quarterback Jared Doege. He appeared in 20 games over 2 seasons with Edmonton, where he completed 43 of 68 passes for 593 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Texas native played at Troy, Western Michigan, West Virginia, and Bowling Green. And the other note to this, too, is that Adam Gilmet, who Mike Hogan told us last week not to worry about, is back. But Jeremy Edwards, the global punter, was cut today as well. I wonder if Dukes' job is not as secure as we think.
David, we talked about Dukes' showing in that game.
Yeah,
it left some questions.
I think the big one here is you got a player who's been with the team for a few years now, and the team wants him to grab an opportunity. They want him to seize a role, but with Chad Kelly expecting to be around, like they haven't put him on the injured list yet. They're keeping him on the active roster potentially for him to start the year. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. I think it's going to be Nick Arbuckle starting. So with Nick Arbuckle there, Cameron Dukes had already lost his first job as the backup quarterback. He was, in a way, you maybe thought maybe he could battle it out with Arbuckle, but wow,
bless you.
Perfect time for that. But it just feels like he lost momentum last year when Dinwiddie felt like, okay, we can't, he's not ready for this. Let's throw an Arbuckle, right? And so that to me was a turning point for Dukes. Like he should have come into this year looking to show, hey, I'm still here. Maybe don't think of Nick as the preemptive starter, even though he did start in the Grey Cup. A chance to redefine yourself a little bit. And the preseason game made me think, I don't know if it just seems like he didn't put himself in the best position to show the coaching staff that, hey, don't forget about me. And now you've got another quarterback coming in, as Griff pointed out, and you had the third quarterback kind of show some people that, hey, there might be something here with JC Horn. Like that's, to me, that's a bit of a bad sign for Dukes. And for Dukes to be playing most of the game on Friday in the exhibition leads me to think that, yeah,
bit of a red flag.
This is a player that is playing for his spot on the roster right now.
The thing that I think, just to put things in perspective, if I remember correctly, he got injured. That's why he lost his opportunity to be the starter, and he never got a chance to get it back.
I feel like the Cam that we saw, because I always remember that game week 1 against BC last year. I remember he got sacked, fumbled, BC ran it the other way. I think it was 20-6 at that point, and we were like, oh, this is over. And then he came out of nowhere and he had a really good second half and rejuvenated the team. But I feel like after that Montreal game, to which Frank famously coined death by 1,000 cuts, it kind of wasn't the same for him. Like the game against Saskatchewan, they couldn't put much together. Montreal, they won, but then the game against Hamilton, either they caught Toronto on a bad day, or they caught Hamilton, who was desperate for a win, getting a win. And then, from there on, it was Arbuckle until Kelly came back. Like the Dukes, he really is good at the QB sneaks and the short goal line situations. But you're right, he hasn't done himself any favors to where it's, hey, I'm just guaranteed to be one of the 3 on the roster. When there's considering you're bringing in someone on Tuesday, I really have to wonder, do we see Jarrett play Friday night? Because I think there's a chance that you're going to see, if Dukes goes out there and struggles, Jared's going to play. And if Jared plays well, that's pretty much Cam, just probably not being on this roster come next Friday night in Montreal.
One thing that the coach has established, and that is that it doesn't matter what hole you're in, whether you're the first guy, the second guy, or the third guy. He has faith in all 3. In other words, he doesn't have a quarterback in his lineup that he can't feel that he can throw out there. And that's why that 4th quarterback question creates the concern, I guess, that maybe he isn't one of the 3. There's an indecisive moment here where they're trying to figure out who are the 3 quarterbacks that they're going to drag around this season and who's going to be on the practice squad. So this is a very serious moment. And Cam, really good quarterback, but the one thing about Dinwiddie,
he couldn't trust him to throw deep.
Yeah, and if he's not focused, that's all Dinwiddie wants. He wants to know. He's created this reputation where he'll give any quarterback a chance, but he's not shy of cutting guys. He did it to Arbuckle, and he did it to a guy he liked. So there's a list of things in the coach's head that if you don't punch those numbers, if you don't check those boxes, he's going to move on from you. And unless you can show you belong. And I think, David, to your point, the Argos as an organization, I think they take serious giving a player an opportunity and let him decide whether he's going to be around. And that's where I agree with you, if that's what you were intimating, that he's out there because now not only is he playing for a position, he's playing for a spot, in the quarterback room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is. And that's the thing with Kelly down, but not like if Chad Kelly was out for, if he's like, let's say he's out for half the year, then maybe you could see, all right, where the potential is for Cameron Dukes to give it afford a little bit more time. Let's say Arbuckle stumbles, you can turn to Dukes, but he doesn't have that luxury. Like Chad Kelly, again, we don't know the full extent of when he's going to be back. It sounds like
brought another quarterback in because they know something we don't know yet.
No, I know what it is. I think it's they might like
His
what
toenails.
they probably like what Jarrett brings because of his experience in the league. And there's something potentially that Dinwiddie likes. We'll get a chance, maybe if we get a chance to talk to him and ask him. But I think this is an opportunity to add a guy and kind of just see how he fits. 20 games doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not nothing. So I think if you're Cameron Dukes, maybe you're a little concerned to see that signing happen, considering yes, you can still have 3 quarterbacks dressed. You can have a guy for short yardage, but the Argos also have to decide if that's something they even want to do.
The Argos system for scouting dictates that they can bring a guy in with intentions of taking over the team and not having seen a single game by that guy. Kelly is that perfect example. How many games did he play before they brought him in?
Was brought in the biggest game of the year and hasn't looked back since.
So we're not looking at an organization and a coach here that's afraid of throwing a guy with very little actual in-game experience into the fire.
The one I wonder too is how much input does a person like Mike Miller have on this as well?
Ooh, it's curious.
Yeah, no, you would. I think you're right on that. He's one of the first people, right, between him and Dinwiddie. I mean, Dinwiddie also knows 2 quarterbacks. He knows a thing or two about it. But yeah, I think he says, I'm sure there's a conversation there with your quarterbacks coach. Say, hey, if we bring this guy in, what do you think? What do you think of his potential? What do you think he does well, and things like that. So, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I don't even remember when he became available. I know he was with Edmonton. I can't remember when they potentially released him. So it's just an interesting conversation here, considering what you have, and they let Brian Scott go.
I'm so surprised he hasn't found a landing spot, to be honest with you. Brian Scott can really sling it.
And I think there's a little more to it than that. I think sometimes there's also, personalities of the personality work.
So I found, sorry to cut you off, but I found out with Jared. Fun fact, in his professional debut, he had a pick 6 returned by Royce Metier. Fun fact. But he in 2024, he dressed in just 4 regular season games, going 1 of 3 for 6 yards, and he was a pre-training camp cut on May the 2nd.
So he's really he's somebody they're going to work with. They're trying to figure.
I'm wondering if this is also potentially a practice roster move as well.
Because is Horn QB3? That's the big question with this.
So this is where this is kind of my thought process. If Dukes, let's say it's between Dukes and Horn, and Dukes doesn't make it, they're not putting Dukes on the practice roster.
No, he's outright cut.
Right? He's going to be an outright cut. So this is probably one of those situations where you get a guy and you can bring him onto the practice roster, and kind of see where it goes from there. Like with Arbuckle, I don't even know what the future is for the backup position after, right, with Chad Kelly. And look, we also don't know what Chad Kelly is going to look like. So I think you gotta be. I think they're just also, they want to make sure they're counting all their. What's the phrase? Counting all their ducks.
Count your eggs. Count your eggs before they hatch.
Right.
Or count. I'm gonna Google it.
I think that does sound right. But we don't. But I think it's just making sure that if there's an opportunity to add somebody, you go ahead and you do it.
I think it comes down to when and if Kelly comes back. Are you a backup or are you a third quarterback? For now, the third quarterback can be the backup. So until such time that Kelly is activated, actually scheduled to be in the game, then stuff's going to get real. So now they're playing for. That's why I'm saying there's some curiosity here that maybe they're trying to buy some time by bringing in another quarterback.
Because you realistically can do it where it's Arbuckle, Horn or Dukes, and then Jared's your practice squad guy, and then one of those guys is cut when Chad ultimately comes back. And also the idiom is
Isn't that what happened last year? Isn't that what happened last year?
Yeah, and instead of Horn, it was Scott, and then Scott was cut
and came back.
Scott was cut, but then he only came back because of the Grey Cup. That was the thing. But hey, for Scott, it's not that bad. Like you do that, and then you walk away with the ring. But the idiom, by the way, David, it's don't count your chickens before they hatch. Thank you. No problem. But the big thing I wonder with this is, though, do we think we see Chad before or after that July 4th game against Hamilton? Because at this point, I wouldn't say he probably plays against Calgary. And then there's also, because it goes Montreal, Calgary, Saskatchewan, Ottawa. So the first 4 games, I don't know. I wonder, because I believe they play after the Hamilton game. I'm like 90% sure they have a bye week. So do you even incorporate either before the bye or after the bye? Kind of like how they got the favorable timing with last year, where the 9th game was Calgary, then they had a bye week, and then he returned against Saskatchewan to kind of get him acclimated with the rest of the roster.
Yeah, I can see that. Again, I think there's just also a lot. He's only just throwing. He's not doing any serious stuff right now. And so that's where I think you got to be you definitely need to be careful. It's easy for us to say this guy doesn't have a job, that guy doesn't have a job. I think it first needs to be established. What does Chad Kelly's situation look like?
Yeah.
Because that all changes the plan, right? If he's only going to be out for a couple, like let's say the first 2 games, then okay, you might be okay with going with somebody like going with a Horn if you feel like, Dukes being around isn't going to work, and I don't know what his contract is like either, right? So I think that also will change things a little bit too. So. Yeah, I think this is probably the most, I say that one of the top storylines for this Argos team is, first off, we know what Arbuckle can do. It's a matter of if Arbuckle, knock on wood, you got to always be prepared for an injury.
Yep.
What is the next step? What happens next?
Well, I don't think Kelly's in the near future. I'd be thinking of him more in the distant future. And I would say that only because if they don't know he's coming back in 4 games and they're not sure he's coming back in 4 games, that means it could become more than that. So at the end of the day, you got to be prepared for whatever may happen. And that's why I think they have the extra quarterback in.
That's why I think that because either the game against Hamilton on the 4th or the one after the bye week, which I believe again is in Montreal, those are probably the more realistic dates for him to come back. But the other thing too is what kind of version of Nick Arbuckle do we get in that week 1? Because we all know Nick's starting week 1. It's just because if it goes great, it's great for the team. But if the start kind of goes south, it's kind of then Ryan kind of scrambling to be like, hey, what's our next step? What's our next plans? To where QB right now, 2 and 3, you got to get right, because you got to make sure you're putting all your money in the basket of the guy that, hey, you trust to go out there and play. Right now it is Nick, but you do have to have that plan B and C as well.
And
any football team does.
And let's not forget, Nick Arbuckle wasn't the starter at the beginning of the year, wasn't the starter at the middle of the year. He was the starter at the Great.
He wasn't even a part of the main camp roster when they first opened camp. He didn't come until like a week after.
He was literally a walk-on. He lived the life of a walk-on.
Yeah.
The thing of it is that here's the thing about Arbuckle. He proved he could play a great game.
Yep.
But he really hasn't proven yet he can have a great season, has he?
That's where I kind of say you have to get QB 2 and 3 right, because even the game against Montreal too, it was more about damage control at that point. Just, hey, don't mess us up. Hey, just do what we have to do to win. Meanwhile, with because a perfect example of this as well is what happened to Winnipeg in the Grey Cup. Zach Collaros is obviously injured last year. Mike O'Shea didn't have a backup quarterback he could trust to go into the game and win. So instead, he rode the hand of Zach Collaros, which was cut open and led to a couple of bad interceptions. It's all relating back to Toronto now, where it's if there's the event of Nick Arbuckle doesn't work out, you have to be prepared for a plan B and C. Like last year with Duke's not working out, quick pivot to Arbuckle, and then you kind of like rolled that wave for Chad. Now with Chad's wave being on, like last year we knew it was 9 games. This year is different, not only because like I know I said the toenail joke earlier, but because you have that, but also to a very serious leg injury. It's not like, anything else. It's a full broken leg where it was bent the other way, to where you have to be prepared for that. And for Kelly, this time around, it's going to be more mental than physical as well to get back on the field. Last time was mental, but this time when you have an injury that's serious, you're always kind of playing with that, oh, hey, let's see how it goes. You got to like walk before you run, especially in a situation like this for the quarterback.
And an ankle is not that easy to recover from.
Exactly. It's usually like I think more 8-9 months, and we're only about 6.5 months since it happened.
And we're not talking about an ankle break. We're talking about a significant break with ligament issues.
It was the other way. It bet the other way.
Yeah, like it was very gruesome. And so when we saw that and they talked about he'll be ready to go for camp, I'm like, that seems a little
cautiously
optimistic. That seems like somebody who is trying to put unnecessary pressure on himself to be back. I understand, like you want to show that you're
put the horse before the cart.
Yeah. And so I
look that up too. No, just kidding.
That one was my head. I had to look up the chickens, not this one.
Sorry, David.
But no, like I still think that, yeah, you're right. Like you don't know. We truly don't know. And so you just have to really, the one thing the Argos can't have happen is their season kind of unravel at the start because they weren't ready for the Chad Kelly not being ready.
Yeah.
Right. You need to be that scenario should have already been figured out. Okay. Nick's our guy, but if Nick doesn't work out, do we pivot? And who do we pivot to? Like you're like, we remember, I mean, you said it, Griff, like it was during the season, it was very tiring, very trying watching this offense at times. Like it's interesting. It was the highest scoring offense per game, but there were times where that offense couldn't score. And they tried both quarterbacks to get the job done. I remember that game against Frank. I wasn't there for, but Frank, you were there for it. The overtime game. I think it was against Winnipeg. You guys, you came to. My band was performing that night, and you came back. I looked at the score and I said, "What the heck happened?"
That was just because they've done this since like in my time covering the team. There's a couple games where they've done this where, if the offense isn't clicking, like other people pick up. Like the 2 games I think of. One is that game with because that was the McFadden pick 6, as pointed out in my piece I published about him last night. And the other one was Calgary in 2023 when Leak ran that punt back to break the Argos all-time punt record, I believe, for returns. So they have to weigh on other sides of the ball, but sometimes the ball's not always going to bounce your way in forms of punt returns or pick 6s. But for the Argos, they have the special teams power to still do that. But defensively as a whole, I think there's going to be a lot of high-scoring games this year. I think there's the defense we're going to learn a lot about quickly with this defense, especially that front 7.
Well, they're all new. So generally speaking, anyway, but it's as far as the quarterback position is concerned, everybody understands the importance of having a good quarterback, good number 1 quarterback in the Canadian Football League, because you have no success without them. The other thing is that I didn't interrupt because I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to interject this minor point. We're not seeing Kelly run around, so he's not even close. I mean, if he's not moving on that ankle, how ready can he be to move around?
That's his game.
And we're looking at a hockey player in Ekholm who for 4 practice days he's looked like he's ready to play, but they don't insert him. That's because of the ankle. In my belief, the ankle is a hard thing to. It's a hard thing to finish being repaired or healed, right? It's a tough. It takes the most stress in football, for goodness sake. I mean, the ankle in football's as important as a quarterback's elbow. I mean, so they're going to move slowly on this. And I think, like I said, I truly believe that they brought in another quarterback because they don't have Kelly on their sights as far as coming early. I hate to say this, but I'm not sure he makes it back any earlier than he did last year. I'm not sure.
I think the one argument you can make is that the Oilers also don't need Matthias Ekholm, but this is obviously the CFL podcast. Or at least wait till the Cup final, or if you have to go to Game 6 and beyond.
Until they lose a game and have an excuse to put him in. But still, with Kelly, he isn't even close, unless they have him running around under wraps and they're like he's doing it not around the field and not doing it there. But I just don't see him. If he's not running around now, he's going to have to run around for a few days before they can bring him back in, I think.
I feel like we're not going to know anything either until at least next week when it's the full team together practicing. If he's even because for the next couple days, look, they did a walkthrough today. There's practice tomorrow. There's a walkthrough tomorrow, and then the game Friday night. We're not going to see him probably do anything or dress. It's next week when they're back at Lamport. I assume they'll be at Lamport next week unless they're somewhere else, when we will know for sure. I think we'll get more of a better sense next week and how practice goes, and even if he's involved in some sort of drills. If he's not involved in drills by next week, then I think you can really start to put the pin on of, hey, we may not see him till either the August long weekend or closer to Labor Day.
Well, the question then is does he end up on the list of game time decisions? Does he end up on the 6th game? I mean, those are answers I'm waiting to see. Those are going to that's going to tell me a lot right there. So, well, they've got a lot of quarterbacks in there now. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm really disappointed that we have a young quarterback who had a chance last year who's apparently doesn't have the faith of the team right now. And I'm just wondering why he's not in a good place in the coach's mind and maybe in his own mind, because he looked, what I saw against Hamilton, he looked almost desperate the way he was playing. I saw desperation. I don't know about you, but because that first time he handles the ball, he tries throwing it 40 yards. I mean, that looked like Caleros. That looked like Caleros first time after he had his bandage on his finger, going for the big, the desperation. I don't know. He didn't ease in. It's like an uncomfortable quarterback that's trying to establish himself.
Well, yeah, but it's also maybe he was trying too hard as well. Like when you feel like there's pressure on you to perform, what are you going to do? You might try to do things that are outside of your scope a little bit. And maybe
doesn't that enter the formula, David, that a coach looks at? What does a player do under pressure?
Very much so. I also just wonder, did Dukes feel like there was an opportunity and it just wasn't there and he just didn't see it properly? I don't know. I think there's a lot that can be deduced from it. I'm also wondering if it's just the confident. You talked about confidence pressure, but Dukes has always kind of struck me as a guy who hasn't always looked uncomfortable, but when he is uncomfortable, you can see it.
Oh, okay.
Like you can kind of picture it a bit with his body language a little bit. And it's funny because I was talking to my uncle about this. He's like, he's small.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but I thought we got past the whole you need to be big to be a quarterback in the CFL. I thought that was no longer really an issue, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm not giving enough credit to that. I'm not putting as much stock into it as other people would. I don't know.
Can we move on to more specifically the Argo defense now? Because really that was as contentious an issue is waiting for, Kelly to get back in the lineup. Who the Argos have defensively in the lineup, as is a real important situation. Now, in fairness to the Argos, they've been always, at least under Dinwiddie and Mace when he was, they loved interchanging defenders, playing different positions. And in this situation, you almost need to do it because they don't know who they're going to put anywhere specifically, right? So they like interchangeable parts, and are these players that they have? Do you see guys here that could, be the kind of players they need?
There's one that I don't know if we're going to see him Friday, but there's a couple that I'm going to be following, but one in particular. One is number 97, Derek Parrish, because he's getting that more elevated role. He's, he got a new contract as well this offseason. So they're expecting a lot from him, especially with the loss of flow is one thing, but losing Brian Cox with that season-ending injury in the preseason game was just brutal. And the other one too, are the newest addition of Cameron Judge, who was acquired in that flow trade. So, like I said, I don't think we're going to see the likes of I don't think we're seeing Winton at all Friday. But besides that, Parrish is the one guy I'm really going to have my eyes on throughout the year to see when you have that role elevated for you, how do you handle the pressure? You're now that middle line, because remember last year Ralph Hawley was unbelievable in that role, but now he's gone, and this defense really, even on the back end too. Obviously, look, T-time is going to be a leading factor, but there's other guys around it where it's like, hey, you're being presented with opportunities to really elevate your game. How do you elevate your game? How do you impress? Because also the other thing too is, remember, Kevin Ivan's here, but they do have a new co-defensive coordinator as well. So there's a couple factors for this defense where I think it's going to take some time, but once they find a rhythm, they find a rhythm. We saw that last year, and I think we're going to see that again this year too.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is quite interesting because, I think Parrish is going to have a big role in that defensive line. I think he's the guy that's going to kind of lead the charge in that aspect. I am wondering, though, when you look at that defense, the one player we've always said that this team always needs is Wynn McManus.
Mm-hmm.
Now look, they did go out and they did address the linebacking core. They did get Judge, and that was a huge get for them. The question I have is, you saw the way that run, the Hamilton running game really took it to Toronto. Now, Toronto is a team that
sliced and diced.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things is I'm looking at this defensive line, the defense that they had. D'Arcangelo is a pretty decent player. I saw some good things in that scrimmage that he was doing. I think I look at the defensive back situation. I think it's pretty good. Up front and the defensive line, Parrish is going to be the guy. I think we already knew this, but it's that other side of the defensive line. Who is going to be the one to step up there? In the middle of the field, I think they got enough guys that've been around. Like Kassar's been there for a while. Varga is the new guy they brought in the trade from BC. I'm not too worried about the linebackers. It is that right edge. After you lost Cox, it's like maybe Ojo can show something, but I think it's way too early for him. They're gonna need to find a way to get the most out of that defensive line, and it's not gonna be easy. Parrish is the only guy returning. That's unheard of. Now, yes, Flo was a trade.
Mm-hmm.
But you lost 3 guys on that defensive line, two to Edmonton and 1 to the NFL. That's significant. So that's going to be, I think, the one thing, if I'm looking at on this defense, who is going to take over in a more, maybe I want to say a leadership way, but just production. Who's going to lead it? They got enough leaders on that defense. I'm not worried about that. But how are they going to find a way to generate pressure, especially, when you got teams in this East or in this league that like to throw? But yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see how that defensive line comes together.
Well, the biggest thing with the defensive line, in my opinion, for teams to be really good is the backups they have, the guys that they rotate in. So we don't know that they have an A group. And now we're wondering, do they have a B group that they can, throw in there and rotate in? it's a big challenge that they have. They have guys they had last year that they can probably count on, but who replaces them? At the end of the day, the defense was, man, it was pillaged. There are very few players coming in this year, so there's going to be a lot of a learning curve here for them, not only in the position they're playing, but for the team to know what they've got. I mean, if you're the defensive coordinator, do you really know what you've got right now?
Because the guys underneath him is Chatfield Jr. and Reeves, but then there's also Ojo. But I do think they're going to try. I think you're on a bit of a rotation for the first little bit. I think Friday night we're going to learn a lot. I think that's going to be something that I'm interested in to ask Dinwiddie after the game because for offense is that appealing storyline of like, oh, what's the quarterback situation? What's this going to be? The big question now too is what's the running back room going to look like? Because Mayan Williams really had a good game on Saturday night, and then you have Kadeem Carey, obviously you brought back, but then also I'm trying to remember the correct pronunciation because I don't know if you guys saw the tweet today, but Mike Hogan said apparently Deontay McMahon prefers to have his name pronounced differently. I'm going to try to look that up, but the other player I'm really curious about this year as well is Dark Angelo in the middle of that linebacking core as well.
I like it.
Yeah. When I say curious, I don't mean I'm worried about him. I'm just curious to see how he does. And hey, you're getting bigger roles and more responsibility.
Well, he's going to be essentially a starter when he was a guy who was, who more or less filled in throughout the season. I was, and I'm sorry, I forgot his name. The receiver, the big guy, he looked good and he looked mobile.
Are you talking about the one that made the catch in the second half?
Yeah.
You are talking about
I have 81 or 86.
I have the depth chart right in front of me here. It was Hooks.
Yeah.
You're probably thinking of Hooks.
Big guy.
Yeah.
He reminds me they've had these kinds of guys the Argos have tried to have a guy like that as under Dinwiddie forever, and they've never been able to find the big guy that can perform the way this guy looks like he has the potential to do it, because he's got feet too. He's got great moves as well.
It's just that when you got a big receiver, they can just win battles that other receivers can't win.
Look at Bridges with Hamilton last year.
Absolutely.
Not even Bridges. Who's the other, the one that won that was a rookie nominee?
Wasn't it Bridges?
Was it Bridges? Maybe I was misremembering him.
I got a pretty good crash course in Hamilton last year when I sat beside Steve Milton in the press box for the game in Toronto. But by the way, with Deontay, instead of being McMahon, he prefers Mac. MacMan.
So instead of Deontay McMahon, Deontay MacMan. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. The tweet from Hoagie is like MACK-MA Han Mac, or it's like Mac Mahan, I think it is. Mac Mahan or MacMan. We'll get clarification. I just feel like
I definitely gonna need clarification on that.
Yeah, I feel like we'll see the pronunciation guide, but there is one unit though on the Argos that I feel like none of us have to worry about, thankfully, and it's offensive line. I feel like, look, everyone's back. They got rid of some guys. Sure, Dejon Allen's gone, Isaiah Cage is gone, penalty merchant, and that. But this year now with Vandal, Giffen, Nicastro being back, and then also Hunter at right tackle. This offensive line, that's a huge position need that the Argos don't have to worry about, thankfully.
Yeah, and Nicastro with an extra year of experience, the young player. His learning curve, he's on a good place. And
hopefully, because Giffen started at right guard in the game against Hamilton, if Giffen can stay healthy, we've seen what he's capable of, because he's a very good offensive line. It's just he's had some injury troubles the last couple seasons.
Yeah, but I don't know if they want to keep Nicastro. They'd rather have Nicastro, I think, at the guard position there. It's very interesting, especially because Hunter being moved from left tackle to right tackle last year kind of really changed the whole look of that offensive line. But I feel like Nicastro, it's kind of interesting to see him not even be in the front to start. Maybe it's a bit of a message sending move. Maybe they didn't feel like they need to see as many reps from him. I find that to be a very curious move.
What about Vandal or Sirocco at center? Who would you put?
Vandal, I obviously had a lot of the reps last year because of Sirocco being hurt. So I just think he's getting the first look just because he was the guy last year. But I wouldn't put it past giving Sirocco a chance at some point to win back that job.
And the other thing too with the QB sneak argument from earlier too is they have a fullback now in Joey Zorn. So, for as good as a QB sneak is, a fullback dive is just for the sick-minded football fan in me. I personally love it. As a football guy through and through, I love a fullback. Just because look at Litre for Hamilton. They literally bring him in, just say, "Hey, take the ball, just go plow through some people." And when you have some big defensive lines in the CFL, like Week 1 against Montreal, you're gonna have to see it. So hopefully we see some fun little creative. That's the one thing I really hope for from Dinwiddie this year is that they get creative with their play calling before Chad Kelly gets back, because we know when Chad does get back, we know who he likes, we know what he likes to do, because that's the other thing with last year too that we didn't pay attention to is like guys like Daniels and Coxie and Brissett truly didn't get going until Kelly came back, especially Tavares.
We've seen a subtle shift with the quarterback sneak. For the last yard or two, there have been teams who are going away from it, and I think the kind of fullback you want will exist a little more. There seems to be a trend in that direction right now, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that you don't need a quarterback that gets you first down. You need a quarterback to back up the first quarterback. We're back to that original conversation. So running backs running, those extra yards, taking the beating that can be. And also with the Argos not having as much success, we might see the fullback because the quarterback sneak for them hasn't been very successful. We saw it all last year. It failed repeatedly. They couldn't get a couple of yards. So,
the downfall of it kind of came in the East Final when they didn't use Dukes and they were using Kelly for it.
Mm-hmm.
But with Zorn, he's 6 feet, he's 209 pounds, like
different beast.
Those guys, it's just, hey, take the ball, go hit someone. Make someone see, make someone see the light, see the white light. That's the whole thing with the fullback. It's, hey, go hit someone, go put someone's butt on the ground. But no, I would ask you guys this. When it comes to, expectations for this team as a whole for this year, because I got to talk about this a little on my show last week with actually had Shinedi on my program last week, so I want to ask you guys, what's the main expectations for this team as comes to this year? Because I feel like a very not appreciated storyline is the fact this team is knocking on the door of being a dynasty in the CFL with potential to get 3 and 4 years and go back to back for the first time since almost 30 years. So what's the real expectation for this year in your guys' minds?
You want to go first, David?
Well, look, I mean, they should always see themselves as contenders, right? You go and you win 2 of the last 3 Grey Cups, you should feel that way. Mm-hmm. But the East, I don't know about you guys, but yes, Ottawa took steps last year. Hamilton is hoping that it's not going to be as bad this year as they were last year. It's going to be but I think Toronto has established a culture. I hate to be the person who always says this, but I truly am starting to appreciate when people say establishing a culture. And I think Toronto has done that. The continuity of this Argos team on offense should give them a bit of a leg up on some other teams. But I don't think it's gonna. I think the days of the Argos going 16-2 are also long gone. I think they are in the 11 to 12 win range for me. But I also think that there's a lot of teams with some X factors, like Montreal. Is the quarterback change going to go in the right direction for them, right? Did they make the right move there? Is Bo Levi Mitchell have another big season up left in him, right? We don't know that, right? He put himself in the conversation last year, but it was a little too late. And Ottawa, are they going to take a step forward, or did the East what happened in the East final, or sorry, East semifinal, I should say, make them take a step back because it shows maybe they're not as ready as they think they are?
I think Montreal are a solid team, and you want to talk about culture. I think they've developed that they have a culture. So on that score, Montreal is a team to beat in the East, even though the Argos won the Grey Cup. I believe that Hamilton's offense last year was the second most productive offense in the league.
Their defense was terrible.
Their defense was the problem. Now, if they sort out that mess, if they sort out the defense, and let's say the defense improves by about 50%, or whatever, or improves, a reasonable improvement, that reasonable improvement will turn into wins. And that's important as far as the Argos are concerned, because for me, as much as it is how they play, the pressure for the Argos is going to be in my expectations, which is the original. My expectations require that the Argos keep up with the other teams, because they're the team that has the biggest target on them. And they're also the team that was decimated more than any other team in the division. Each team in the division has made improvements where the Argos have tried to get back to where they were. So my expectations for them, and what expectations I feel we should have, is I think the expectation before Labor Day is be in the playoff hunt. I don't think they'll be competing for first place for multiple reasons. First of all, because they're going to need some cohesive experience. They're going to have to, get used to each other, become a team, because they're starting with so many strangers. So for me, my expectation is they've got a big challenge in front of them, because if Hamilton finds a defense, Montreal maintains the great way they play, and Ottawa, to your point, David, if they improve, that means the Argos' expectation, the 12 wins, for them to get those 12 wins, they're going to be a real hard-fought 12 wins that they need to get. Yeah. So it's going to be a big challenge for them. My expectation that I want, if I were sitting in a fan's shoes, I want to see them in the playoffs, because great news in the Canadian Football League, make the playoffs, anything can happen.
Yeah, I'm like with David. I'm in the I think they finish anywhere from 10-8 to 12-6. I would love to see them finish first, but I still feel like Montreal holds that standard of first place, just because, look, they did it last year. There is the big change of quarterback, sure, but with a coach like Jason Moss and with the defense that they still have, you can't count them out. Plus, two, healthy Tyson Philpott, healthy Austin Mack, something that was missed badly in the East final. But Ottawa, I could say Hamilton's the big story, but for me, it's honestly Ottawa. We saw last year that we saw Drew Brown and Bob Dice speak. We know that Sean Burke wants this team to get better. And a big thing with Ottawa too is that they were really building something culture-wise there with guys like Adarius Pickett, among other names, that hey, getting guys to play there, getting guys to buy in, getting guys to now put the league on notice of, hey, Ottawa's not the slouch anymore. You're not just going to go in there and whoop them. Obviously, look, they played Toronto. It went ugly for them, but they're the team I'm most intrigued by, because they're the ones who I wonder, if they get off to a bad start, how do you bounce back from that? That week 1 game, they opened the season against the Rough Riders. Them and the Rough Riders in that Thursday night game. And then Friday night, no air horns in Montreal is another really eager game. But for Ottawa, my big question is if you do start poorly, can you rebound from it? Because I think for Ottawa, their key to success is getting off to a really hot start in those first few games, because they do play Montreal and Toronto in their first 4.
I want to add something to Ottawa as far as what they did in the playoffs. I think they were just a team not ready for the playoffs. No experience in playoffs.
They didn't have a running back.
they didn't have a running back, and they just weren't ready for prime time, if you will. And the Argos are very experienced, being in the position of being in the playoffs, and they were at home as well. So,
yep.
Ottawa had a tough road, but I think they've garnered some respect, and I don't mean respect from other teams. I mean, they've garnered respect for themselves. This is a team that spent a couple of years trying to build their self-esteem. And I think they did a good job of building their self-esteem. And I think the playoff game was less than they had hoped, but I don't think it was enough to damage the great things that they did last year, getting into the playoffs and getting to that game.
Well, okay. So like Ottawa, the issue too, though, is they were such a good home team. And on the road, they weren't very good. You got to figure that out. Like you got the pressure of playing away from your stadium. Yes, it is something that teams need to have to handle. But yeah, like they can't go into a situation where they can't win on the road. I also think that with Ottawa, the offense needs a bit more consistency, and it needs a bit of explosiveness too. Like it wasn't a very hard offense to stop, in my opinion. So you know, I do think that Ottawa has the potential to do more, but I mean, Toronto, Montreal have just established themselves so well, especially Montreal defensively. I think Montreal's defense is going to once again have to be the MVP if the team wants to compete, like it has been. But I am a fan of how these teams have figured out ways to remain competitive, even if maybe they're not their best. But yeah, Toronto's gonna have their hands full, and they always do. But I think this year's no different.
One thing with Montreal's schedule, I'm just looking at it right now. 3 of their first 4 games are on the road. So they open at home against Toronto, and then they go to at Ottawa, at Edmonton, and at Hamilton. They weather that storm and go at worst 2-2. It sets up perfectly for them where they play then essentially 4 of their next 6, basically for the month of July and August. They go away from home twice. So there's a lot of factors with Montreal too, where it's like, if they keep it up as well, it's like, okay, who's going to stop them? You know, who's going to take them down? And then with Hamilton, we know Hamilton's easy to figure out. Just you can't start off poorly. You can't start off 0-5. You gotta, because they have the same 2 games they had last year. They had at Calgary and versus Saskatchewan, which is weirdly a back-to-back coinciding with the game that Toronto opens up at home with against Calgary. So if anything, too, it's Ottawa. Like I said, I just think if Ottawa gets off to a hot start, has less games in the rain, which for some reason last year it seemed like every Red Blacks home game it was either cloudy or pouring rain. But I agree with David. If they can go on the road and steal a few, like when they come to Toronto in August, that kind of helps ignite the fire of, hey, we can do this. Kind of like how, last year Toronto went into BC and got a big win. Went into Winnipeg, got a really close win to secure a playoff spot. Ottawa needs to embody that in 2025, I think, if they want to have a chance to be in Winnipeg come November.
Experience. They're getting it. It means something.
It's just unfortunate that the 2 teams in front of you are the 2 teams that won the last 3 cups.
Absolutely. But there's a gap there that they can make up. Yeah. So there's room for improvement for them. But either way, I think the Eastern Division is going to be very tough. I wouldn't count any of the teams out. Nope. If things roll out good for any of them, it could mean a lot to each of those teams. All 4 teams, all 4 teams, in fact, are hoping for something that's something they can move on, that they can roll on. Like David said about Montreal playing healthy.
The big thing with me though with the East teams, I think out of all 4 of them though, Hamilton's under the most pressure to have success. I know they're all, but I have to say if I had to rank it 1 through 4,
yeah,
because of their bad start. And also, too, because of just everything else involved with Hamilton. That's why I think, because of how bad last year went for them, this year it's very imperative. I think that they got to be. You can't start off bad if you're Hamilton, but because for Hamilton it's more don't repeat yourself. For Ottawa, it's how do you keep moving forward.
Well, with Hamilton, they got to worry about not this again because they have such a long bad history. And not because they're bad, but because it's been a real checkered history where the team really hasn't looked good. And last year, the part that kind of, I don't know if it bothers me or it makes me wonder, how could their offense be so good and their defense be so bad? Like the contradiction was something that beguiled me. I don't know about you guys.
It was weird because Mark Washington got fired and then Chris Jones came in and all of a sudden they had continuity and they were playing better. But the biggest thing for me with them is the tag team that they have developed now with Jamal Peters and Deshaun Amos on the back of that defense is something to watch for. But I think they just need to establish proper leadership, because that's something I think they've missed since Simone Lawrence did retire. Like, where I'm not saying anyone's not a leader, but like they need that that voice on the defense that really can bring everyone together. Yeah. Like what Winton does in Toronto,
That's a football thing. That's a football thing more than any other sport. And there's captains in every group. It's in hockey, you can have one line and they can all be the C, the A, the A. In football, that's not the way it works. You need basically zone leadership, if you will. It's important. Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be a fun season for sure. Is there something, David, that you're anticipating this season that maybe you'd like to talk about? What do you see, something that's virtually something that we'll find interesting to talk about in the future? What aside from the commissioner, that's an obvious one.
Well, that's not an in-season thing for me. It's will we see anything change in the West? That's probably the big one. Is there any change in the guard in the West? That's
like, is Calgary for real in the exhibition season?
I mean, is somebody ready to take on the mantle of being the new king of the West? That's
because right now Calgary's probably, I think we could all agree, going on what happened last year, they're the team with the most improvement necessary.
I think if they don't see improvement, we're going to see a true changing of the guard within that system where, they're going to have a new coaching staff and everything else. My big story with the West, honestly, is how does Nathan Rourke do with a new coach and a full season of, there's no pressure trying to make the NFL, because there's a big mental hurdle with that last year. And I know Edmonton's another obvious one, but what is Trevor Harris is going to do in his second year? Because Trevor Harris is kind of on that arc now where he wants to win one that's his own. He has the Grey Cup as Toronto with the backup, like Cody. But how does Trevor Harris define his legacy, and how does Nathan Rourke cement his legacy? That's what I'm really watching for with that West quarterback battle. Apart from, hey, are the Winnipeg Blue Bombers just going to run it back again? And because we know they're desperate to win a Grey Cup. Also, I think them hosting the Grey Cup adds more pressure to that for them.
The one handicap Rourke doesn't have to deal with in BC is he's not coming into Adams' team, because there was a bit of that going on, right? And it was like there were separate loyalties there, and Adams draws a lot of love from his teammates. That's just who he is. He's a real good teammate, and I can imagine that was a tough hurdle for Rourke and the players, for that matter, who would, I'm not saying they willingly laid down, for Rourke. I don't think that was a willing thing, but I think it was an emotional thing. And a fresh start this year with Adams not there, I think, is the best thing for BC, and that'll give Rourke the best opportunity to be the quarterback in BC and not feel like he's usurping anything.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I guess by the look in David's face is he's run out of gas.
Not running out of gas. I'm running out of time. I got him literally 10 seconds. I got to go.
Well, let me make it simple for you. Griff, thank you for doing this. David, as always, thanks for doing this, guys. We'll see you again during the season next week, and have a great night, guys. And thanks for being here.
Take care, everyone.